Greetings from the farm this week. In this week's share, you will find an assortment of peppers. So if it's in a little cardboard box, it is the lunchbox style, so they're sweet. We put the hot peppers separate from that, and the lunchbox, we're putting in most of the shares, but not all. So if you don't see them this week, you'll see them next week. The hot peppers will be loose, and we have some cayennes, which are actually drying on the plant. So we included them in the share even if they're starting to dry down. All you have to do is let them dry completely, and then you throw them into an airtight container for storage. You can grind them up and use them as pepper flakes. And we have jalapenos. We also have a bell pepper or a Carmen pepper. So you'll either see a bell or a red Carmen, which is sweet as well. We have the last of the outdoor tomatoes for the year. We threw kind of an assortment in, some reds, some yellows or straight yellows. Use them and enjoy. We have yellow onions for the first time. These are more of a storage onion type, so if you're behind on onions, they'll keep. Same goes for the garlic, it will keep if you're behind on garlic. We have lettuce has returned. We have some salad greens. It's an assorted lettuce mix. We planted this quite a while ago, and the seed sat in the soil for about a month before they even germinated. But we're happy to have it. Delicata winter squash. This is one of our favorite winter squashes. At least Emma and the family really likes it. We all do. This is not a long-term storage squash, so eat it up right away. I really like to just cut it in half, scoop the seeds out, dice up jalapeno peppers, and roast it in the oven with the jalapenos in there for kind of a spicy squash fry, which is quite good. You can also cut them into wedges and do the same thing and make like a French fry out of it. We have fingerling potatoes. We have not grown fingerling potatoes in many years, so they do look kind of funny. These are kind of a delicacy. They're wonderful roasted. We have Swiss chard. I think this is only the second time in the summer share. The stems and the leaves are edible. I really like to just fry or saute onions and garlic and olive oil, and then end up sauteing the stems and the leaves with that, and then do like a vegetable broth or chicken broth and reduce it a bit, or a little bit of balsamic vinegar. And then we do have purple top turnips. They're quite sweet, and the leaves, which are bitter, are wonderful when treated like mustard greens or collard greens or something like that. You can fry them up, and they taste wonderful as well. Have I missed anything, Melissa?
I do not think so.
It's kind of an assortment this week. It's probably the last of a share that looks this summery.
Yeah.
So coming up in the next few weeks, we will have, we'll start with sweet potatoes here, and probably next week or the week after. We'll have Brussels sprouts, even if they aren't frosted, just to get them into the summer share. We will have rutabaga. We'll have more celeriac, more of the root crops that you would associate with winter. So, am I missing anything now?
I think that's about it.
All right, until next time, have a great week. We're standing out in a cover crop field. If you were watching the video when Jack Knight, our organic inspector, was here, this was recently seeded then and maybe had just been mowed. And so this is the sorghum Sudan grass, which we're actually letting it go to seed so that we have pheasant food in the winter. It can come back as a weed. Sometimes they call it shatter cane if it establishes itself, but we're far enough north it shouldn't. We also have in here Japanese millet, which the same thing, it doesn't actually survive the winter, but all this seed is going to be pheasant and wildlife food, so it'll eat all of that. And we underseeded it to alfalfa, sweet clover, and clover. And so I think this was like maybe an 8 species mix. We mowed the sorghum Sudan grass to encourage root growth, so it helps to break up a hard pan and to kind of go down into the lower soil profile. And so we'll just let this go. It'll act as a snow catcher in the winter, and this will be one of the last fields to get planted next year. In this field, so we're standing on a field road. In this field, we drilled hairy vetch and rye, and so here's the hairy vetch coming up, and the winter rye is this right here. And you can kind of see the rows. The vetch took really, really well. The rye in this field not as well, which means maybe I need to play with my depth adjustment. So this will live through the winter, and the hairy vetch is a legume that'll fix nitrogen in the spring. This will also be one of our later planted fields in the spring. We'll let the rye and vetch get about that tall before we decide to mow it down. And the vetch will provide some nitrogen for next year's crop. We'll likely haul some cow composted manure on here. And then I'm not sure what's going in here next year, but it'll be happy.
So let's talk about diversity just a little bit. So there are 8 different species that you planted over here and a few on the left.
So talking about diversity.
Yeah.
So the more diverse your cover crop mix mixes are, typically the better it can be for soil, but it definitely ups the management, because most of those species don't necessarily go to seed or at the same time, or they don't flower at the same time, or they could become a weed like buckwheat or something like that. So planting this late in the year, the most success, so we ripped a crop out of here, and we went with rye and hairy vetch, or winter rye and hairy vetch, because they can establish late in the season and make it through the year. This was a summer seeded cover crop, so you have more options at that point in time to get things to go. And I was saying, like with the sorghum, Sudan grass, and the millet, it doesn't worry me too much that they're going to seed. And then the legumes, so like the sweet clover, clovers, and alfalfa will live through the winter, and they'll fix nitrogen for next year as well.
So, and in the beginning you talked a little bit about diversity and wildlife habitat and things like that. When you first moved here in 2006 in the fall, how many pheasants were on the farm?
Oh, so in the fall in 06, I don't think we saw any pheasants here at all until about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, or 8 years ago. We have wild turkeys now, so the wild turkeys will come up in here too. Which the first time we saw one of those was maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and it was quite surprising because Janet, who's lived here her whole life pretty much, had never seen a wild turkey on this farm until she saw that one, and she was almost in disbelief. At first she was thinking it was somebody's turkey who had escaped. But we've seen at least 2 or 3, and they seem to be taking up residence here, so it's kind of fun to watch that. So we like having these long corridors. So this is a 740-foot stretch, which is about, and it's wide enough, it's a little less than half an acre, and we have another couple of cover crop plantings that look very similar on other parts of the farm. So the pheasants will likely be able to evade predators and have plenty to eat, be happy right here, the turkeys as well. Yeah, it's one of the more enjoyable parts about doing this is having some of the wildlife on the farm. I know pheasants aren't native, but I kind of like watching them.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.